Hi, and welcome back to Old Fart Engineering. My name is George, and on today's video we're going to be making branding irons. We're going to use two different types. This is a large 300 watt iron. It's got a removable tip that we can unscrew and insert our brass. Then this is a 100 watt iron for smaller branding irons, and I've got two pieces of brass bar stock for this one. The problem with this one is it takes a unique style tip, which has a retaining ring, and inside is a spring which compresses it. So we're actually going to modify this tip by cutting it off and tapping it with a 5/16 thread. So for that reason, I also have a 5/16 bottom cutting tap, because we're going to be cutting short pieces of brass, threading it so it will attach here, and then carving and engraving our logos into it. These are very handy branding irons for woodworking projects. Since I build custom guitars and do wood carving, I'm going to have a large one for my larger projects and then two smaller ones. So let's get started with this build. Alright, we're over here at the small bandsaw. For our large branding iron, we're going to need a 2.5 inch piece of brass. This is 2 inch diameter. We're allowing a 1/2 inch for our engraved area, and then we need a 2 inch shank for inserting into the 300 watt soldering iron. So let's go ahead and cut this. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and run over to the metal lathe with this and turn our 5/8 diameter, 2 inch long mounting shaft. Alright, we're back over here at the lathe now. I've chucked in the small piece for the smaller branding iron. We're going to be reducing the shank here to 5/16 so we can run a die over it and thread it. So let's go ahead and start doing that right now. Alright, so we have our 5/16 thread on there. I'm just going to kind of touch the end of it to get a little bevel on there, clean that up because it did flare out a little. Okay, so our first piece is done for our small ones. Let me go ahead and take this out. Let's chuck up our piece of brass. Alright, we're going to go ahead with a little center drill here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take a 1/4 inch end mill with a flat tip because I need a flat bottom to this hole. So we're going to go ahead and line this up. I want to take it in almost 3/8 of an inch. We're going to go ahead and run the tap into this now, and hopefully the brass isn't too soft that it grabs a nice thread. I'm going to set that up and we'll be right back. Alright, I'm using a bottoming tap here so we get threads all the way to the base. I don't want to go too deep into the hole because we can strip the threads. So I want to see if we've got enough there so that this will grab. And yes, indeed we do. So that's perfect. All I need to do now is part this piece off, and I'll do that on the bandsaw actually, and then we'll bring it back here and we'll face the end of it. So let me go cut this off and I'll be right back. Alright, I've cut the piece off. We're going to go ahead and face it. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a little chamfer now on each end. Just a little touch, that's all it takes. I'll do the same thing on the other side, and then this is done. Off camera, I'll go ahead and I'll make the other piece out of the smaller diameter brass, and then we'll come back and film the large piece being prepped. All right, I'll see you in a minute. All right, so I've chucked up our 2-inch piece of brass. I'm gonna go ahead and face it and chamfer this end, and then we'll flip it around and turn our shaft on it, which is gonna be 5/8 of an inch. So let's go ahead and get this positioned up. There we go, that's our size. We're just going to go ahead and clean up the end here and put a chamfer on it so it's not sharp. Alright, so we're inside now at my engraving bench. First thing we're going to do is take a little bit of alcohol and clean off the brass so we don't have any oil from the lathe to mess up with our attaching our logo to it. So just very simply, I'm going to just scrub it with some alcohol. We do that to each of the small pieces as well. Alright, let's move this out of the way. Let's wipe them off with a paper towel. Alright, now as you can see, I have 3 different size prints of my logo. Now, there are a lot of ways of transferring printed images onto metal or wood, and I don't happen to have a laser printer. If I had a laser printer, I could do this with acetone. But since I don't have a laser printer, and I think most people have the inkjets, I'm using Mod Podge. And because I'm using Mod Podge, I do not need to reverse my image, because I will put my image on here face down, so that when I engrave it and use it as a branding iron, the letters are in the correct orientation. All you need to do is put a little bit of Mod Podge on your brass, and just with your finger, just rub it around, kind of get it even, and then take your logo, center it as best as you can, and just press it down. Make sure that everything comes into contact, that you don't have any air bubbles. Try not to let it move. I hold it with one finger and rub lightly with the other one. We don't need to press hard. This will hold on its own. And what we'll do, we're going to let this dry overnight, and tomorrow when we come back, just with a little bit of water, we'll just rub the paper away and it'll leave our ink from our logo. Alright, so I'm going to do the 2 little ones as well. Going to put a little dot of Mod Podge on each one. Now Mod Podge, you can get it at any arts and crafts store like Michael's, Hobby Lobby, even Walmart in their crafts section has it. So it's no problem to find this stuff, and it's water-based, so you know there are no chemicals that are going to hurt your skin. Let's get these pressed on here. Now remember, if you're doing it this way, you do not need to mirror your logo. If you have a laser printer and you want to use acetone, you need to mirror your image and then just place it on top of your brass, and with acetone and a towel, just press with acetone on the back side, and it will actually transfer the laser ink onto the metal. But again, since I don't have a laser printer right now and didn't want to go find one just for this, this works perfectly fine with an inkjet printer. Okay, so now we're going to let these dry overnight. Tomorrow we're going to come back and we'll start our engraving. Well, we're back here at the engraving bench, and what I'm using is a little bit of actually window washer fluid, just the plain blue one, not the bug off or anything like that. Dip my paper towel in it. Now, this has been drying overnight, and this is very important that you let it fully dry. I'm just going to come and dab with this paper towel and saturate the paper with the cleaning fluid, the window washer fluid. Now, you can do this with regular water if you want. I think the light amount of soap that's in this actually helps. So I'm just going to get it so the whole surface looks nice and wet. I'm going to give it a moment. We're just going to wait a second to let it start softening the paper. Now, just with your finger, you'll be able to start rolling this paper, and you see how it's just curling up? I'm not putting hard pressure. I'm just rolling it very lightly. If you scrub too hard, you could remove your logo. The key here is just remove enough of the paper so you can clearly see your image. Now, if it starts to feel a little bit dry and it's not rolling as easily, just take your paper towel that's still saturated, apply a little bit more of the liquid, and again, just gently roll. I am not putting any heavy pressure. This is just me gliding my finger over the paper, and you see the paper just comes apart. And I really believe that the soap in the window washer fluid assists in this. Now you can see here the paper's completely gone. That's not critical. I might rub a little bit more around the sides, but I just want enough rubbing so that my logo is clear. I'll get rid of a little bit of this debris here. Now, if you make a mistake and you rub too hard, it's not a big deal. Just go ahead and clean it all off and start again. But you want to have a nice visible logo to work with. So there you go. That's certainly workable. I've already done the same thing to the other two, so they're ready to go as well. And we'll let this dry now and come back and start the engraving process. Now you see, if I rub hard, you see this just comes right off, which would also remove our logo. So you don't want to rub hard, because you see it does come away. Okay? I'm going to stop playing with that, otherwise I'm going to screw up my logo right here. So let's not rub hard, because that's what would happen, and then your ink comes off. We let this fully dry now, and we'll come back in like 20-30 minutes, and we'll go ahead and start engraving this. All right? See you in a moment. All right, so now this is dry. We're going to start our engraving process, and what I'm using is actually a basically a dental tool. It's a carbide burr mounted in a high-speed dental handpiece. The one I have comes from GRS. It's air-powered, so there's going to be a lot of whining and noise, but these little burrs cut very well for aluminum and brass. Excellent on wood as well. So we're going to start with this one, which I'm not sure how clear the camera is going to pick it up, but it's a straight cutter. We have a variety of them that I'll be switching back and forth depending on what we're doing, but my goal now is going to be to just kind of outline this thing to get a sharp edge, and then we'll start digging away the background. You know, the removal of the bulk of the stuff, you know, isn't a big deal. It's about getting that nice crisp edge. So let's get started with this. Let me turn on my air. And let's get started. Now I am using a ball vise so I can easily rotate this, but quite honestly, you don't need this fancy of a setup to do this. This can be done pretty simple and primitive. I just have the tool, so I use the tool. Now you could also do this if you don't have you know, a rotary tool like this or like a Dremel, you can actually do this with hand engravers. It just takes a little bit, you know, more effort and a little bit more time. Now the paper will fuzz out on you a little bit, but you know, you just come in and you wipe it back a little once in a while. And I'm staying away from the actual edge of my logo. I'm just kind of getting this roughed to it. And then I'll come in with a less aggressive burr and bring it up to the edge of the logo. But I am coming pretty close to the edge, so. Now I'm looking at this through a stereo microscope, so to me it looks like I'm carving the Grand Canyon here, but in reality these are very, very small, shallow cuts. And you don't need them to be extremely deep, but you want them to be deep enough that they separate from the background so you get a clean branding mark when you put it on the wood after heating these. But I'm going to go ahead and stop talking now and just work on this so we can kind of film it fast forward for you. Otherwise, it'll be incredibly long and tedious. So I'm going to shut up now and just let the work speak for itself. Alright, now the basic outlining is done. I'm going to change burrs and we're going to go and start, you know, taking back a little bit of the background. So we'll be back in a second. Alright, so we're back and I've switched over to kind of a football shaped burr so I can take away larger areas of the background. So let me turn my air on and we'll get started with this. I will actually go ahead and continue doing the background off camera just for the sake of time. It's just a continuation of the same thing. I'm trying to get it down at least 2 millimeters is what I'm trying to do. You know, about a 1/16 of an inch or a little bit more. The more you relieve the background, the deeper you can brand before picking up your background marks. But I'm going to go ahead and finish doing this background off camera. Then we'll come back in and we'll detail our edges of our actual logo that we want to be branded. All right, so I've taken the background down already and kind of rubbed my edge a little bit with the football burr that I was using. Now I'm going to take some Riffler files and kind of flatten out the background. First, I'm going to start with a rasp style Riffler file to just kind of bring down the bulk of the background and kind of level it out so I can see where I'm at depth-wise. And once I'm done with the rasp one, then I'm going to switch over to a smoother one and kind of detail that down a little bit better even. And then I have some small little pointed curved rifflers to help me get into some of the centers. We won't be able to reach all of them with this, but the bulk of it I'll be able to do. And then I'll be able to put some small stones in my handle, in my handset there, and very carefully go around and polish around the edges so we get a nice crisp edge to the branding iron. So I'm going to spend some time now with the files, and once I'm done with that, we'll come back and I'll show you the detailing of the edge of the logo using some small stones. All right, so I'm going to work on this and then we'll come back. All right, so I've done the filing work and gotten it relatively smooth. I'm now going to be using a small ruby burr, also a football shape, to get in between the logo and clean it up some more. All right, I think we're in pretty good shape there. We're going to go ahead now and remove the paper and lap the top of this with a diamond stone. All right, we'll be right back. All right, so I've taken the ball vise out of the way, and I'm now going to take our branding iron and rub it very gently back and forth, keeping it as flat as possible on this diamond honing stone. So just nice and easy. This is just to get rid of any burr that's on the edge of the letters. And you're just looking to see that there's a consistent scratch pattern, so you know that the face of the branding iron is smooth and even. Oh yeah, that's looking good right there. Well, I'm going to set this up in the handle, and we'll see how it burns, see if there are any touch-ups we need to do, because we'll be able to tell that when we do our first burn. All right, so I'm going to set it up and then we'll be back. All right, so the iron's been heating up for over 15 minutes now, and it's actually getting really hot, so let's go ahead and test the stamp. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I mean, that's it right there. Now all we got to do is make the two little ones. So we'll continue in a moment. Okay, so I've got actually the medium-sized one set up. Here's the small one. So we're going to start working on this one, but now I have changed my bit. This is almost a tapered cutter. It's a carbide. It's got a small flare at the end, but it's a flat bottom, so we'll be able to get right up into the edge of these and very carefully cut along them. You know, when you get into these smaller pieces, it actually becomes a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to go ahead and start on this. I'm not going to talk about it. You're just going to see, you know, how I approach this. And then off camera, I'll continue it and bring down the background just like we did on the big one. So I'm just going to start and show you the way I do my outlining. The rest of it's all the same as what we did before then. All right, so let's get started. I'm slowly working up towards the edge because this is actually a fairly aggressive cutter for its size. But I want to keep a straight edge. We'll come back to the edge later with the little football shaped one and kind of blend it. But this thing is very, very aggressive, so I have to pay real close attention and be careful. But it's giving me a nice, solid, straight edge. But as you can see, I'm just coming in and coming out because I don't want for it to grab and pull me. It's extremely sharp. Sometimes it's actually good to use, oh, see there, I just slipped a little. I'll be able to fix that. Now I won't be able to go all the way into the corner with this one. We'll have to use a different bit for that. But it is a very aggressive cutting bit. Now these little bits that I'm using, you can buy them online on Amazon and on eBay or from a dental supply house. But I actually get the majority of mine from my dentist. Once they've used them and can't use them anymore for patients, most dentists would be willing to give them to you. Just ask that they please sterilize them before they give them to you, because they can just throw them in their autoclave and kill off any germs or bacteria, because these were used in surgical procedures on people. So you want to make sure that they're sterilized. But, you know, even when the dentist is done with them, they're still more than sharp enough for working on, you know, soft metals like brass and aluminum. They also work very well on wood if you're doing some small wooden pieces. So, you know, ask your dentist. You might be surprised. They might be very happy to give it to you. And then as a thank you, you can always make a little something for them. And for me, my dentist gives me a whole bag full of them every time I go in for my cleaning. So, you know, leverage your connections and you'll benefit, and you'll also make them happy by giving me a little something. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and continue this off camera because by now you've seen the way I'm approaching it here. And then we'll come back when I'm detailing the edges with the smaller burr. Alright, see you in a little bit. Alright, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and I've worked down some of the background as well. It was a very aggressive burr that I was using, so it took it down real fast. I've now switched over to a really tiny little flat cutting burr. Also, it's a fairly aggressive tooth on it, but it's super tiny, so I'll be able to get up into these little corners with it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me turn on my air. Alright, I hope you guys can see this. I mean, I'm working under a stereoscope. I wish I had one that had a camera mount. It would be better to show you guys this. But I'm just going into the tiny areas that I couldn't get into with the other one. I mean, it's just the lightest little touch that I need to do in these little spaces. And again, this thing cuts really aggressively also. You know, it's amazing to me how the smaller burrs really cut much faster than the larger ones. And I also save all of my worn out ones just so that I have something that's not too aggressive for some things, because this can easily get away from you. But we're just about done with it. And then I'm going to grab the little football shaped one that's the ruby stone to come in and just kind of polish all the edges out and clean them up. I mean, this thing cuts almost with no touch at all. I mean, it's unbelievable. But this rotary tool is spinning at 400,000 RPMs. It's air powered. It's a phenomenal piece of equipment. They're fairly expensive, but I use it for all kinds of things, from doing this kind of metal engraving to then carving and texturing some of the carvings I do on my wood. And also, you know, when I'm doing some small work on plastics, this works very well because there are all kinds of little tips that will work and cut different things. So it's a wonderful tool. Like I said, this is a GRS. They sell a lot of engraving supplies. There are some cheaper ones out on the market. The first time I got one, I bought a much cheaper plastic one for about a third of the cost. And I'll tell you, it works. You know, it can do stuff. It just doesn't have the power. I mean, it doesn't have the torque that this one does. So, you know, I mean, the cheaper ones do work, but you do get what you pay for, as in, you know, everything in life. So, I just got a little bit of touching up to do around this corner here. And I think we'll call that, oh, no, got one spot right here. But I think now we'll call that good, and we'll switch over to the football-shaped burr. So I've put in the football-shaped burr. This is the ruby one. It's not the aggressive one like we used on the bigger one at first. But this will just come in here and it'll take down some of these high points in the background, and then I'm going to go around and polish the edge of the logo. But I hope you can see this. It's just taking out all the scratches and bringing the back down kind of to an even level. I'm going to slowly work my way up to the edge of the logo. Now this is one of these instances where this is actually a ruby that's kind of worn down already, so it's not so aggressive. So I can kind of ride the edge of the logo without worrying too much about it taking away too much material. So it gives me kind of a little bit of a buffer by not being as strong and aggressive as the other burrs I was using at first when I was roughing this out. I'm basically just sanding the edge of the logo with this burr. And unfortunately, I just noticed it's not going to fit into some of my smaller spots. So we'll have to find something different for those. But at least I can work the background and work around the bulk of this using this burr now. Alright, so I'm going to do this off camera, and then I'll have you come back and join me when I'm starting the next step. Alright, so I've switched over now to a long tapered abrasive point. This is almost like a miniature cut saw type of an abrasive, and I'm going to be using this kind of to flatten out the background a little bit on this small piece. I mean, I've taken it down somewhat, but I need to take it down a little bit more, and with this I can come up with a point to the edge of the logo. So let me turn on my air and I'll start doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and continue working the background. off camera because you've already seen how this works. So I'll bring you back then when I switch burrs again to do the next part. All right, see you soon. All right, so I think I've got it pretty well under control. I think it's deep enough. The only way to know is we're going to have to hook it up to the wood burning iron and test it. I'm going to go ahead and peel the paper off that's remaining and flatten it on my diamond honing stone, and then we'll hook it up and see how it brands. All right, so I'll bring you back when we're branding with it. All right, so we're going to go ahead now and we're going to test our branding irons. I've been heating up the large one now for almost 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and see what we can get it to do here. Put it down, give it a little bit of a rock back and forth. Wow. All right, that really branded in there nicely. So I'm going to unplug this one and then I'm going to plug in the smaller one and we'll see what it can do. I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back now with the medium-sized branding iron. Now this is a 100-watt iron, whereas the big one was on a 300-watt iron. Let's see what this can do. Rock it back and forth, give it a moment. This has been heating up for a little bit over 10 minutes. Oh yeah, that's pretty nice. That works very well. All right, let me switch out the tips on this one to put the small one on, and let's see if the small one even worked out at all. We'll be right back. All right, so now I have the smallest of the three. It's been heating up for 10 minutes, and let's give it a shot. Wow, that actually came out really good too. I had my doubts about this one because it was so small and hard to work on, but that is definitely a nice brand. I mean, I had it a little bit crooked, so the top isn't quite as dark, but I'd say it's successful. So we have 3 successful brands now. For different size projects, I can choose the different size brand that I want to use. Thank you for joining me on Old Fart Engineering. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something from it. Please remember to click subscribe, like, hit the bell icon for notifications. Feel free to ask questions, make comments, and come back again. We'll have more videos here on Old Fart Engineering.